Well, hello there and welcome to October's movie reviews with Brent and Frankie. How are you guys? We haven't seen you for a little bit, but thank goodness we have some better movies to talk about this month. Don't we, Brent?
We certainly do. It's been a good month of releases. And some of them are available in theaters, some of them are available for streaming.
Yeah, which has been great actually to be able to stream and see them at home a little
So
bit.
to get us started, we have a movie that's currently appearing on Netflix now, titled His Three Daughters, and this is an excellent film, much better than I was expecting when I went in to see it. Tells the story of three daughters who are sitting on a death watch for their dad, who's in hospice care. And in addition to the stress that's associated with caring for him, they don't exactly get along terribly well with one another. So they're having to reconcile their differences in terms of personality and outlooks, as well as deal with the stress of their dad passing in the process of passing away. And it's a very kind of gut-wrenching film at times, given the fact that a lot of very raw emotions come out between the sisters. But they also realize that if they're going to, work things out, this is the time to do it, especially since they've got a common goal in mind in terms of caring for their dad in his final days. And it's interesting to see how their different personalities mesh or don't mesh with one another, and also to see how some of them have kind of misconceptions about these people who one would think are supposed to be closer to them with them being siblings, but things don't always work out that
Yeah.
way.
Yeah.
And you've got three very distinct personalities. The oldest sister is named Katie. She's played by Carrie Coon. She's a control freak, very intolerant of a lack of order and things not going right. Her youngest sister, Rachel, played by Natasha Lyonne, who is a stoner and watches TV and bets on sporting events.
He never gets too far
Yeah.
away from that personality.
And then the middle sister, Christina, who is trying to play peacemaker of sorts between the two of them.
Yeah.
And
Elizabeth Olsen.
yeah, and
It's an
it
interesting
ends up
period.
really getting into a lot of very heavy stuff between the three of them. But they're also constantly reminded by a hospice caseworker who is basically saying, you have to remember why you're here.
Yeah.
And you're going to have to kind of start working this stuff out or set it aside because you got your dying dad to take care of. And
Yeah.
that sort of forces them to be a little more tolerant, a little bit more realistic, to address these issues and to make the effort to understand why things have turned out the way they have and why their personalities and attitudes and outlooks are the way that they are, which ends up coming as a revelation to all of them in many ways.
Yeah.
Um, it's a movie that anybody who's ever had relatives that they don't get along with can probably relate to quite well, um, especially under trying conditions like this, because it's something else that a lot of people are going to experience at some point, again with relatives who they don't get along
Yeah.
with.
Yeah.
So it's a case of figure it out and deal with it later.
It's interesting. It was an interesting blend of the three actresses, I think, or the two actors, you want to call them that. Carrie Coon, I first saw, I think is it Gilded? I think she was in Gilded. She started, which is kind of by the same writer who did Downton Abbey. But it was in New York, turn of the century. And she very similar character. She's very controlling, very in charge kind of woman. But I fell in love with her in that show. I thought she was just absolutely amazing. And I was surprised to see her in this. I don't know why, but I was. But I loved it. I do. I really, really like this a lot. Natasha Lyonne, again, I don't think she gets too far away from her character ever. Like she always seems to play the
No.
same person, whether she was, in Orange is Black or anything that she's been in. It always, to me, she seems like the same. But I liked her in this. She made me feel something, which is, you know,
Well, she's done a lot of really good work over the years and has never really received the recognition I
yeah,
think that she deserves. I hope she gets it this time because I thought she was absolutely outstanding. I mean, she was my favorite of the three
Oh, was
performances
she?
in
Yeah,
this
I
movie.
couldn't
Yeah.
stand the smoking. Like, I'm just like, oh, every time I see people smoke now, it's like, I can't breathe, stop it. It's crazy. But yeah, and Elizabeth Olsen, a very different Elizabeth Olsen in this one.
Yes.
Yeah. But again, somebody I really greatly admire as an actor. So I love this movie. I thought it was good. And I especially loved the end. Like
Yes.
when
Well,
dad,
yeah, I mean that was the other thing I liked is the fact that their dad, played by the character actor J.O. Sanders. Again, he's played a lot of very different kinds of parts over the years, but I think this was probably the best performance I've seen him give as well. In the fact that he kind of steps in and says, "Okay, we're going to settle this, at least while I have the time."
yeah,
And he really comes through quite well. So
very
I
interesting.
like this one a lot.
I do.
It played briefly in theaters, but it's now available for streaming on Netflix. So if you want to check it out there, give it a look. I'm giving this one 4.5 out of 5.
Yeah, I would too. I really, really liked it. I thought it was great. All right.
Okay,
We'll go
so moving on,
to-
we have another really intriguing film that played briefly in theaters and is now available for streaming, at least in the US. I'm
Yeah,
assuming
not in
it's not
Canada
available
yet.
in Canada yet. But I really love this movie. It's called Omni Loop. It's a combination comedy, drama, sci-fi offering that tells the story of a 50-something woman played by Mary Louise Parker who is dying essentially. She's been ironically, she's a physicist who's been diagnosed with the presence of a black hole appearing in her chest. And she knows that she doesn't have very long to live because this is going to grow and expand and consume her. But she also is prepared for what's about to come because she's been down this road many times before. Essentially, she is stuck in a temporal loop that keeps repeating.
Hmm.
It takes her back 1 week at a time, and she's repeating the same week every time. And she's the only one who knows it. So all the other people who are around her are reacting to the circumstances, are doing the same thing as if it were the first time.
So Groundhog Day on
Essentially, yes.
right or something.
The thing is, after a while, she grows really tired of this because it's the same thing every time. And she's not even able to die to get to be able to move on. It just
Oh,
keeps
wow.
going over and over and over again.
Yeah.
So she ends up one day having a conversation with somebody in which she gets really perturbed and lets her frustration come pouring out. And apparently that is strong enough to change the timeline. It's an act of will that helps to bring about a new direction for her. And not long after she has this conversation, she meets a young woman played by Ayo Adibiri, who is a physics student. So they have this common interest with each other, and they begin discussing the circumstances she's going through. So they work at deciding to see if they can figure out a way to change the timeline to be able to essentially solve the mystery of time travel. And that would allow her to go back in time more than just the 1 week. Now, the one thing that happens as she's going through all this is that she begins to start thinking about how she's lived her life a lot, both professionally and personally. She's got some misgivings about things maybe not having quite turned out the way that she wanted in both areas. But, she realizes also that when she was young, she had an experience where some enigmatic force gave her the message that she was destined for greatness. And
Hmm.
she says, okay, so where's the greatness? I haven't seen it. And that's what really prompts her soul searching to go further and look for what the meaning of personal greatness
A lot of
is.
people think that about themselves.
Yeah. And that's the thing that I really liked about this movie is it took it from something that was potentially kind of wild and wacky as a comedy
Yeah.
and kind of off the wall as a sci-fi film and brought it down to an extremely personal, intimate level, which is something you really don't see happen very often in sci-fi. So I really thought that was quite a trick to be able to take all of these different elements and pull them together effectively in one story. And Mary Louise Parker, I mean, I've always liked her.
I like this.
This is probably, I think, her best screen performance. She's really good in this. She shows a variety of emotions from joy to sadness to vulnerability to, craziness. Um, this is a movie that it's unfortunately kind of flown beneath the radar. And, I
Maybe
sort of
because you can't
discovered
get it here.
yeah, I mean, I sort of discovered it by accident. I was going to a theater to watch something else, and I saw a poster saying "coming soon." I was like, "What's this? I've never heard of
I haven't
this."
even seen a trailer for it, right?
So I watched the trailer for it, and I thought, "Wow, I've got to check this out." And I wasn't the least bit unimpressed with this. I mean, it was excellent all the way around. It has a lot of really good film editing in it, and it does uses that to kind of compensate for the fact that it doesn't rely on a lot of heavy duty special effects to
Yeah.
carry the story. And I was mesmerized by it. I absolutely loved it. I can't recommend it highly enough.
Wow.
It's
All
it's
right.
another one that I would give
All
four and a
right.
half stars to.
All right.
It does begin to drag a little bit in the second half, but it's really designed to help get people in that very thoughtful mood about looking back on your life.
This,
Okay, so next we have something we don't really talk about very often on here, and that's animation.
yeah,
I find a lot of animation is kind of silly and manic and over the top, but I really like The Wild Robot.
I did too.
This is a delightful story about a robot that's voiced over by Lupita Nyong'o, who was being transported to its owner and ended up being involved in a transport crash on a remote island. And she's initially, when she's revived, following her programming as she was supposed to do, but finds herself in an environment that's completely foreign from what she was expecting. Specifically, the idea of having to deal with all these woodland creatures. And over the course of the story, you end up seeing her evolve to become more quote unquote human in
Mhm.
many ways,
Yeah.
and also to take on responsibilities that she maybe wasn't prepared for, such as being a mother figure to a young Gosling whose parents were killed. Um, and as the story plays out, you see her become essentially more than the sum of her programming, more than the sum of
Absolutely.
her parts.
Yeah.
And I think that's a really important message to be bringing out in a movie, especially one that's animated, because you don't typically see that level of insight or thoughtfulness being brought to movies like this.
Yeah. At the beginning of the movie, it was a little bit too, and
Yeah,
oh God, this is not going to be that good. And actually, my husband left, and I stayed and I watched it, and it settled down. And once it settled
yes,
down, and the
yes,
story took off, it was beautiful, and it's a
yes.
beautiful message. It's a great movie, and I just loved everything about it. I really did. And the other night, my husband goes, did you ever finish watching that movie, Wild Robot? I go, I did. And it's on TV right now, and I wish I couldn't believe it. And he goes, it got like a 7.5 or an 8 rating. And I go, it was really good. I actually cried at one point in there, and it moved me. It
I
moved,
could see where it would have that effect on somebody.
yeah,
Absolutely.
it moved me. And I thought, this is a really good movie. Good, like for adults, the messaging in there is for adults, for kids, like you don't give up. You, you can become more than you think, than your programming, more than your,
Yes,
where you start in life. A lot of people, oh, well, you're from a trailer park or whatever. It doesn't matter where you come from. You can be more than that
yes,
if you choose to be. And she chose to do that. She said, it wasn't from here. It was from here. Like everything, she got to override it through her heart, what her heart wanted, not what her brain told her. And I think that's what it is in life. It is that.
well, she really did become more than just a robot, and that's a message not just for artificial intelligence, but that's a
Yeah.
message for us too.
Yeah.
Don't be a robot. Become who you're meant to be, who you're destined to be.
Yeah.
Uh,
Exactly.
the other thing I liked about this movie was the fact that it had a lot of supporting characters that were voiced over by famous actors who I didn't even recognize that it was them until I saw the credits,
Yeah.
because they just absolutely disappeared into their voiceover parts. People like Mark Hamill and
Yeah.
Catherine O'Hara,
Here, I can't forget.
Bill Nye. I mean, when I was sort of blown away when I was seeing the credits. I'm like, that was him, that was
I
her.
know. Yeah.
You
Yeah.
um, I agree with you that it is a little bit manic at the beginning, and I think part of that may have been due to the fact that they were trying to say, well, okay, she's in a very different set of circumstances, and that would confuse anybody. But I think they overdid it a little bit in terms of how long
It
that
was
went
just
on.
like,
Yeah,
like that.
and the degree that it was played out. But
Yeah.
but once it settled down, yes, I definitely really appreciated everything it had to say. It also has an underlying and a little bit of an underdeveloped environmental message as well playing out in here. I would have liked to have seen them play that up a little bit more, but when I was doing some further research on this, I found out that this is based on an entire series of books. So my guess is you're probably going to see sequels at some point. And I
Mhm.
think you'll maybe see more of that environmental stuff start to come out.
The idea of AI and robots and having control on robots and, they're not allowed to hurt people or they're not allowed, but then you have, really the evil robots come after the robot kind of idea, right? Which as a human, you're taking away her rights, you're taking away her thoughts, you're taking away her essence, and that's not good. And so I think there will come a time in the very near future, and I know I even talked about this 20 years ago, where AI, you may have a robot in your home, and even with Alexa, it's like, "Good morning, Frankie, how are you?" "Oh, good morning, Alexa," right? Like you can't help but I can't help but be not part of my own programming, which is to be polite. So it's interesting though to think they're not real, but they are, but they're not, and somebody put their voice and their heart and soul into it, and uh,
Well, it's sort of akin to the idea that a lot of people have said, how can you possibly have friends
yeah,
only in cyberspace on social media?
yes,
Well, I mean, it's very possible. I mean, you end up having these interactions with them and you may have never met them in person, but
yes,
you end up having these, closeness relationships with them that are just as real as anyone who you would actually meet physically. So,
yeah.
I mean, why not the same for artificial intelligence, I think it's
And
indeed very
artificial
possible.
intelligence, I mean, they even Elon Musk, they have this debate about artificial intelligence going beyond itself to become its own thinker, right?
Right.
Its own programmer. Uh, who knows?
Another thing I liked about this film too is the message it was conveying about the need for everybody to pull together in a crisis. Because you see that as you get further on into the story, and you figure, hey, if animals can do it, why why the hell can't we do it?
And we do it when there's a big crisis. We do come together, and
Yeah,
that's the thing. It's like Independence Day, the common enemy. Once you have the common
yeah.
enemy, then everybody can come together, and that's it. But then once that's over, okay, I go back to eating you, and you can eat me. But let's wait till this is over. But I mean, that was the idea that they can pull together. And humans, we have seen it in times of crisis and tornadoes and all kinds of things where
Mhm.
people come together and help one another. We can do it in a crisis, but we just can't do it when we're just living next door to each other for some reason.
Now, the one thing I would kind of give parents a little bit of a caution for on this is the fact that this I wouldn't exactly term this to be like a cartoon for young
No,
kids.
no.
Because I mean, the messages and the ideas are a little bit more sophisticated. Some of the language that they use to describe what's going on is more involved, and they might sit there and be bored by it. So
Yeah,
I would recommend this for like older kids and up from there. So,
yeah, I agree.
um, and if you want to see this, it's still playing in theaters. And it's also available for streaming and on home media. So there, you've got a lot of choices to be able to catch this one. I'm going to give this one 3.5.
Yeah, yeah, I like that.
Okay, so then again, in an entirely different vein, once
Um,
again, we have another Netflix movie called Will and Harper, which is a documentary about friendship
yeah,
between actor Will Ferrell and his longtime comedy writer colleague from Saturday Night Live, Harper Steele. When they got to know each other, Harper Steele was Andrew Steele. But several years ago, at the time when the pandemic came on, he decided to be
she,
exploring the notion of becoming she. Um, Those are feelings that Andrew had been harboring for a long time and never really addressed and kept it very quiet. Nobody on his circle of friends or family knew a thing about this. But at the time of the pandemic, he had some time on his hands and he had an opportunity to decide to explore it with a therapist and began the process of transitioning to become a woman. And when he contacted everybody, particularly Will Ferrell and some of their other friends, uh, Will Ferrell was wondering, well, okay, I mean, I respect what you're doing and I support you, but I mean, how is this going to affect their friendship? So they decided that they were going to explore this idea by taking a cross-country road trip together, in which essentially it was getting to know an old friend in a new context.
Yeah, it's a
And
beautiful, beautiful little movie. And I think that people might go in with a preconception.
yes,
And Harper was just so open and vulnerable and real, as was Will. I
yes,
mean, he's a funny guy, and Andrew Steele was a funny guy, and now is a funny girl, and still writes. So, he's a writer for Saturday Night Live and writes all kinds of funny things. But this was real. This was real
yes,
and interesting. And not many people let you into their life like she did, and in a non sensationalist way. She wasn't trying to be sensational at all. She was trying just to be Harper. And what is my life? She was vulnerable and she was scared and she wanted to know, can I do the things I did as Andrew as a woman?
yes.
Am I going to be okay? Because
Yeah, because I mean, some of the venues that she and Will used to hang out at, I mean, they go to watch, you know, races and they go to sporting events and they'd hang out in dive bars and things like that. And the question became like, can I still do that?
yeah,
And it was interesting to see the reactions that they got and the fact that places where you thought they might not necessarily be accepted, they were.
yeah.
And then there were other places where they met with some very definite overt resistance. Um,
Her
and
children were fabulous. Her children
yes,
were, is this dad? It's still dad, but it's
yes,
Harper. They called her Harper, which I thought they were really so accepting. But yeah, I mean, in places like Idaho or Ohio or wherever they went, you thought, oh my God, like they're not going to accept her. But Texas was not kind.
no, it really wasn't. And it was also interesting when they had the encounter with the former therapist at the Grand Canyon in Arizona.
Yes.
And she came clean about what kind of advice that she had given to other people who were considering transitioning
Because it was
in the past.
uncomfortable 20 years ago, and it's
Yeah,
uncomfortable now. And I know today people have a real hard time with this concept.
yes,
I think they have a harder time with it because the schools are kind of pushing it or bringing it into too early. I mean, I remember when I was in school, you didn't even have to talk about periods or whatever until, you were like in high school almost. And here they've got, they're 6-year-olds and they're telling them about, what do you feel you are? You a boy or a girl? Like they shouldn't be asking them in the first place because they don't know. They could choose whatever, right? And
yeah,
always talk about, well, I present as this or that. It's too much for a lot of people to take, and it's a personal journey.
yes,
It doesn't have to be out there for everybody. Like I never let people into my sex life. I don't know why other people have to let them in. Like that, it was the same thing with when people first started to come out of the closet, and it's like, do you think somebody would choose to get beat up? Like they're
yeah,
doing it because they have to tell you, they have to come out. Like they're not doing it for any other reason. And so the same with people now who are transitioning. There might be some who want to sensationalize and whatever, but I would think that the pain. She was 61 years old at the time of the documentary. Not an easy thing to do at 61.
no,
She's
no,
not a pretty woman. Her voice is definitely deep.
yeah,
It'll be hard to have a relationship, I think, maybe. And Will asked her, he goes like, are you looking at another transitioning woman? Like, what do you, like, is that who you'll be with? And it's interesting because most of the women that I know from men to women, they are with women, which is
Well,
interesting.
I thought her reaction was interesting when she basically said, what I'm really most concerned with is waking up next to somebody and talking about the dumb movie we watched the night before.
Exactly. Everybody wants
Yeah,
somebody to love and hold them and have a relationship with. And it doesn't matter. It doesn't have to even be sexual. It just needs to be real, right?
that's right.
Be real.
Exactly.
Like,
This was a really very eye-opening film. And the other thing I wanted to add too is that the trailer didn't exactly do this movie justice. Because when I saw the trailer in the theater, because it played in theaters before it went to Netflix, I watched the trailer and said, I don't know, maybe I'll go see it, and then when I heard it was going to streaming, I said, okay, I'll just wait and see it when it gets there. And then when I watched it on streaming, I was like, this movie is way better than the trailer
oh,
did
way, way
justice
better.
for.
Yeah.
So
And
I would
well,
advise anybody who's looking into this movie, don't give a lot of credence to the trailer because it doesn't really sell the movie as well as it could.
this is a very intimate, beautiful film, not expected from Will Ferrell. Like
No.
Will expect to go for the cheap joke, and you did one. Are you a worse driver now that you're a woman? I mean, that was kind of funny. But like to think that Harper bought this house for $10,000 in the desert because she could maybe go there and dress as a woman and have nobody around to comment on it or to take hits at her on it. It's sad. It's very sad that you can't be you. It's very sad that she and I'm so happy that she was able to do that journey and try all the things as a woman that she didn't get to, that she did as a man, and try it on, see how it fit. Maybe it'd be different by herself. It's probably a lot easier to have Will there, somebody that people recognize and are going to be a little bit kinder maybe, but they weren't kind in Texas and they were really ignorant. And I think you guys need to look at yourselves.
Well, I also find it's a very uplifting film in terms of, giving yourself permission to do these kinds of things, to have the personal power
To be
brought to you to be able to do these things. Because it's not easy. I mean, as a gay man, I know, how difficult it was 40 years ago when I started going through this process.
100%.
And, now it's like second nature to me. It's like, okay, well, this is who I am. Deal with it or don't. I don't really
Right,
care.
right.
And I think the trans community is, newer to this phenomenon than the gay community is at this point. So they're still earlier on in the process and the phase of making that kind of openness available to themselves.
I think part of the issue with the trans is those who aren't don't want to pay for surgery. I'm not paying for surgery. Those that aren't look at things, oh, well, they're taking young kids and chopping off body parts. No, they're not. Oh, they're taking young kids and turning them into something that they're going to regret later. I don't know. I'm sure there's laws in place and different things. And if you're a parent, I think was it last week somebody had told me about the parent who got very upset because her daughter says she's a cat, and so she took her to the veterinarian, and she wanted the veterinarian to look at her because she was sick, right? And the vet says she doesn't have cat anatomy. Yeah, but she's a cat. She says she's a cat. She's a cat. Well, you can say what you want, but your anatomy is not that of a cat. It's that of a human being.
Well, the one thing that's, I think, fortunate in the fact that this is all becoming more above board now is the fact that it's forcing people to start to be more realistic about it, to get past a lot of the superstitions and misconceptions that people have held about it. And that is going to ultimately, I think, have a ripple effect into other areas of people's lives when they start to look at what it takes for them to feel comfortable and come forward about being themselves. Feline considerations aside.
Yes, I think that they have a right to be them and to live as themselves. And people should just say, what do you care?
Yeah.
What do you care? As long as they're not doing it to little kids who can't make a decision as an adult on their own, that's a different story.
Now, the other thing I liked about this too is it's really good as a road trip movie.
Oh, it's
It's
a great road
nice,
trip
you
movie.
know, and it's really good as a buddy movie as well. I
I was
mean,
disappointed that Kristen Wiig didn't come back with a song. Where's that song, Kristen?
so I recommend this one highly. I'm giving it 4 out of 5. And, like I say, again, don't pay attention to the trailer. Let the movie stand on its own.
Yeah, yeah. You know what? Will is a good friend.
Yes.
He was a good friend. Yeah, go see it. Watch it, guys. You'll love it. All right.
Yeah. Next, we have an independent movie that's available for streaming now called Mountains. This was actually made in 2023 and picked up a couple of Independent Spirit Award nominations, but just got released back, I believe it was at the end of August. This tells the story of gentrification and the effect it has on an ethnic community. In this case, specifically the Little Haiti community of Miami. The main character in the film, his name is Xavier. He works as a deconstruction worker, tearing down old buildings so that new structures can be put up. And he's making good money at it. He seems to enjoy his work, but he also is doing a lot of the work in his own neighborhood. And as a Haitian immigrant himself, he's seeing his community being torn apart, but he's kind of looking the other way in the process of that. So this is a film that's essentially addressing the question of, when it comes to somebody who's involved in work like this, are you part of the progress or are you part of the problem? Given the fact that it's causing the community to essentially, disappear from his own background. Um,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
you can see how torn he is as this story plays out, where, he wants a better life for himself, just like most immigrants want for him and his family. But at the same time, is the cost worth it when it comes to losing your roots? And he sees evidence of that all around him. He's reminded of it by family members, extended family members. He's reminded about it through radio broadcasts on Haitian radio. And, it makes him uncomfortable, especially when he begins to see that in some cases, the work is done specifically just to promote gentrification and nothing else.
yeah.
And clearly, the people who are moving into the neighborhood are not his people.
And somebody's making a crap load of money and is not.
Absolutely.
And like all immigrants, he wanted a better life for his son, and he doesn't understand the lifestyle of his child who wants
Yes.
to be a comic. He wants to be a
Yeah.
comedian. He's trying to do that. And the parents understand hard work. They understand labor, working with your hands, doing his mother sews. His dad works, like you said, in construction and tearing down stuff. So they don't understand this, not the softness, I guess,
Yes.
and the hours that their son sleeps and gets up and when he comes to bed and all of that. So it's interesting there as well. This other story that's kind of playing out.
The first generation American born children of immigrants are the ones who always have it the hardest, because they're ending up having to go through trying to explain themselves and their interests to parents who don't relate, because that's not their experience, and they think that their experience should be their kids' experience when
Right.
it's often not.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's brought out loud and clear in this film.
Yeah.
Um, one of the things I loved about this movie is just how vibrant the images of the community were in terms of the colors and the musics. I mean, you see the richness of Haitian culture that's in place, but is also in jeopardy of disappearing because of that.
Yeah.
And it's got a sadness to it, and the fact that you really don't want to see these things go, because it's distinctive, it's rich, it's colorful, and on the verge of disappearing.
Yeah. Yeah. I think I also like the relationship that he had with his wife. I think
Yes.
you don't usually see that kind of tenderness after 30 some odd years with somebody, he's still coming home saying, "Hey, Queen, you look
Yep.
beautiful." That was nice to see,
Not just tenderness, but also
like a lot real affection.
a level of respect that a
Yeah,
lot of times you don't necessarily see in a
right.
lot of relationships like that.
Yeah,
I mean, he put her on a pedestal. I mean, that's why he called her queen.
yeah,
I mean, he realized the value that she brought to the relationship and how much he cared for her and loved her and wanted to do for her.
yeah,
I mean, at one point they talk about buying a new house, and he was specifically was pressing the idea that she could have her own room to do her sewing.
right.
I mean, how many husbands are
Well, sorry
necessarily
about
that thoughtful?
that. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Yeah. No, it was good. It was a nice movie. I liked it a lot. I was a little disappointed in the ending. I thought they let me down a little bit there, but
Well, I think, and I mean, I don't want to be spoiler here, but I
yeah.
think one of the reasons why the ending came out as it did had to do with the idea of it being a caution in terms of if you're not careful, look at what can happen.
Mm,
So, um, and it's not just affecting Little Haiti. I mean, it's affecting the ethnic neighborhoods in many urban centers across the country.
yeah, there was a secondary message too with, the bit of racism that existed in Florida or between the Latin and the Haitian community. You know, you're okay to work with, but I'm going to keep you at arm's length.
Well, all you have to do is look to Donald Trump's comments about Haitians to see what's been happening with the way
Oh,
they've been
geez.
treated. I
His
mean,
comments about anybody.
um,
But yeah,
plus the fact that, I mean, that even goes back as far as to the early days of the AIDS crisis when Haitians were singled out as one of the four groups
yeah,
that were most prone to come down with this particular illness. So, I mean, there's a long-standing prejudice there. That doesn't quite come through in the film here, but I mean, it's part of the legacy that
yeah,
has been going on with the prejudice toward that segment of society over the years.
yeah. That was sad to see. But
But this one, as I said, is available for streaming. If you're interested in seeing um,
you can watch it off Apple.
yeah, I mean, you can see a vibrant, colorful, warm movie in many respects for somebody who is dealing with a dilemma of how to figure his way out of a situation that is a tough one to handle. I really love the actor who played Xavier.
Yeah, me too.
And I don't want to butcher his name, but I believe it's Atibon Nasir. And
Yeah,
he's really good. I would love to see him do more work because I think he's a really talented actor. And this was a great showcase for him. So I'm going to give this one 3.5.
yeah. I can work with that.
Okay, so before we close, I wanted to make a quick mention to our viewers that my blog, wrapping up the Reeling
So good.
2024 Gay Lesbian International Film Festival, is now posted on my website. I have brief reviews of all 12 movies that I saw at the festival. This was probably one of the best lineups of films that they've ever had. A lot of really good stuff. They might be a little bit difficult to find at this point, but I'm hoping that they make it into wider circulation. And there's two in particular I wanted to talk about briefly. One of them is called Turtles. It's a Belgian-Canadian co-production about a long-term gay male couple coping with what happens when one of them ends up retiring. He's a long-term Brussels policeman who decides that, he'd kind of like to have some time to himself to do what he wants to do, while his partner is hoping that they're going to be spending more quality time together as a couple. And it causes a real disconnect between the two of them so that they're actually having to contemplate the idea of, do we stay together or do we end up getting divorced? Um, it's an interesting mix of comedy and drama. It has elements that reminiscent of the Swiss film that came out a couple years ago called Golden Years.
Mhm.
Um, And as things begin to grow a little more contentious, it starts to turn a little darker with comic elements that are very reminiscent of the old Michael Douglas, Kathleen Turner film, The War of the Roses. This was probably, well, I mean, this was my favorite film from the festival. It's probably just about the best film I've ever seen at the Reeling Festival over the years.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I recommend it highly. It's really very well done. And the thing I also liked about it is the fact that it moves along at a very steady pace. There's no lags, there's no gaps. It gets in, gets out, tells the story, and moves on. Really very well done. I gave this one 5 out of 5.
Wow.
You
Okay.
know.
Hopefully I get to see it.
And then I also, my other favorite from this film was this festival was called Haley Rose. It's a Canadian film about a young woman who leaves her dysfunctional family in Nova Scotia behind to head west and start a new life. And after 10 years of being in Calgary with a new partner and a new life, she ends up getting called home for a supposed family emergency. She's very reluctant to do it, but she ends up going and ends up running into a lot of surprises and a lot of things that relate to unfinished business from when she left. It's a very touching, but at the same time, very funny movie. I really enjoyed this one a great deal. It's available for streaming in Canada, so I mean, you have no trouble finding it north of the border. The US, it hasn't been widely distributed here yet, other than the festival circuit. But if you get a chance to see it at the festivals, check it out. Hopefully, it'll come to streaming at some point. I'm giving that one 4.5 out of 5.
Nice.
So,
Brent. Well,
and at the moment, I'm currently attending the Chicago Film Festival. I'll have more on that next month. I've seen some great films there so far.
nice.
And I'll also be attending the Black Harvest Film Festival at the Gene Siskel Film Center. I'll have more on that next month also. So the festivals right now, they're a source of really great films. You get a chance to see one in your area, go to it. And we'll also have some more about new award season movies coming out next month as well. So we're going to have a full plate next time.
Sounds good. All right.